What's up, superheroes? My name's Miles. Welcome to Miles and the Supermen, a podcast series for men and boys. Our world is in trouble and it's not going to fix itself. If we want to transform tomorrow into a beautiful place for everyone, we're going to need our men and our boys to help bring that vision to life. So this is our second episode. My first episode that I did was kind of off the cuff. I was just kind of looking around at the world and I had this idea to do a podcast for men and boys for a while. But I wasn't sure how to do it. And so a couple weeks ago, I was like, well, I feel like there needs to be a new kind of conversation that we start as men. And so here we are. This is my second go at it. Now that I've had a little time to prepare, I figured I would upgrade my recording quality a little bit. So welcome back. If you haven't caught the first one, this is all going to be on a playlist on YouTube, on my YouTube channel. There'll be links in the description, and so you can go check all that out if you want to. But the first episode is really, it's just mostly me just explaining kind of like why I'm doing this podcast and sort of what you can expect out of it. So it'll be, I think, plenty worth your time if you want to go back and revisit that. But the basics of what we're doing here, I'm going to go ahead and do a little rundown and let you know. It's kind of like how we do this. And I think we'll be fine to just pick up from here today. So, second episode here at Miles and the Supermen. We're here to have candid and compassionate conversations about manhood and masculinity. We'll hear from boys and men about their experiences with, joys and struggles and growth and all that. We'll talk about what it's like to live as a man or a boy in the world today. I want to take some time and learn about our role across the globe, both around the world today and, across time, both in the past, what has manhood and masculinity meant in the past, and, maybe what it means moving forward too. We can sort of ponder that together and think about what we want manhood and masculinity to mean moving forward. Let's see here. I want to sort of the practice that I want us all to get to do here together is I want to discover truth, I want to nurture love, and I want to preserve our humanity, right? Humanity is in a pretty tough spot right now, and we as men have an opportunity to help settle, preserve, secure, make things safer, slow things down, de-escalate, help things be healthy and strong and secure and thrive, and not just be in fight or flight all the time. That's something that we have the ability to do as men, and that's something I want to explore here. We'll discuss all kinds of other subjects through the lens of masculinity, and we'll speak with men and boys as well as other human beings who experience us from the outside. And so together we can gain clarity by listening to all these diverse voices, and that'll give us a much better picture of who and what we really are, so that it's no longer just what I think I am or what I feel. It's true understanding, right? And when we're elevated, educated, and empowered to be our best selves, we each become happier, healthier, stronger, on our own. But then we also sort of become unstoppable together. So with that in mind, let's get started. The subject for today is my catchphrase. You can find it if you look on my link tree, it's right underneath my name. And my mantra, my catchphrase is "The way we win matters." And I settled on that some time ago because I was looking around at the world and looking at the way people are approaching conflict. And I was trying to figure out, why are we all working so hard to make the world better and it keeps spinning out? Why is it getting worse? Why is there some disconnect between what we're trying to do and what we're actually getting? And there's a lot of answers to that. It gets really complex, and that's part of why we have a whole discussion around it, a whole podcast. But I did sort of start noticing this one thing, and it was that it seems that very often the way we win matters when we look back on a thing. In the moment, it feels like win at all costs for a lot of things. And then later, you look back and be like, oh, I always see this. You see it a lot with, and so the next thing I want to get into is I love movies. And so you see this a lot with like, they'll drop a movie and then people will sit and pick apart the plot and be like, oh, well, you could have done this, or the character could have done that. I don't know why they didn't stop and just think to do this. It was right in front of them. And I think that that's a really fascinating thing that we sit and do, because the same thing happens in real life, right? While we're in a real moment of challenge, or real, trying to deal with something in real time, we kind of do the best we can with what we got. Ooh, excuse me. And, there's that saying, oh, it seemed like a good idea at the time, or you had to be there, And so I think that that thing that we do with movies can happen in real life too, where we later find out, oh, you won, but the way you did it actually made things worse for you in the long run, right? So there's a lot of fun examples of that. There's a lot of, and so we're going to discuss the way we win matters. That's today's subject. So I think the way that I'm going to be doing this podcast, since I work in arts and athletics, but mostly arts, academics, and allyship, I like breaking up my content into those things too, right? So arts, academics, allyship. It covers mind, spirit, and body. So if I'm exploring a subject, we can kind of get it from all different angles, and that's why I like doing it that way. So, to that end, we'll start with the arts, right? This idea of the way we win matters. Growing up, I was a fan of movies ever since I was super little. Superheroes, fantasy, sci-fi stories, stuff like that, right? So for me, it was the Superman, the Luke Skywalker, the Ninja Turtles, all that stuff. And so this idea of the way we win matters, one of the things that I love is the quintessential story of Superman, right? So Superman is, I'm represented on the shirt today, but Superman is this emblem, this sort of quintessential, the basic standard version of like, what would a hero wish fulfillment, right? We think of who would that be? What would that person be like, right? And Superman is a person who, when you watch that Superman movie from back in the day, I know there's a new one coming out soon, so I'm excited to see that one too. But the one from back in the day with Christopher Reeve really captured, I think, in a single exchange, this idea of like what we want our heroes to be. And so he rescues Lois Lane from a falling helicopter or whatever, and at the end of they have this little exchange. And as he's flying away, she says, "Who are you?" And I've always loved that question because, it can be like a straight, like literally, what's your name kind of thing. Or it can be like, who are you to the world? Who are you trying to be to the world? Or what is your legacy or whatever, So I like that. So in this moment, she asks him who he is, right? And he's got to protect his identity because there's a logistical reason for that. So he answers honestly, but not honestly from a logistical standpoint. Like, he doesn't give her his name, but he does answer honestly emotionally in that he says, a friend. I'm a friend. So when she asks who he is and he says, I'm a friend, I like that because it's uncomplicated. It doesn't pick sides. It doesn't whatever. It just shows that unambiguously, unconditionally out in the world, he's just there to be a friend. To who? Well, we later find out to humanity, But I like that. It's simple. It's clear. It's instantly recognizable. Like, you can recognize when somebody is trying to be your friend, generally speaking. If they're doing it in a way that's loving, respectful, and, then it's very clear. You can tell somebody's intention if they're trying to be friendly with you. That's why you can even make friends with animals and stuff like that, right? Because you don't even need words. You can just tell by somebody's energy whether or not they're friendly. So I think starting off this sort of like exploration of the idea of the way we win matters, I think it sets an interesting and poignant tone to start with the original himself, Superman, because you have this simple idea that I'm here to be a friend to everyone. I'm here to create better situations, right? He's not here to be a savior. He's not here to be a conqueror. He's not here to be anything else, right? He's not, because, a lot of these superhero stories, they get all tied up in this idea of saviorism. But frankly, Superman sets a different example. He's like, no, to be a superhero, you don't need to be saving people all the time. What you really need to do is be a friend. That's heroic. And so we'll sort of get into a little bit later, I think, part of why that's such a big deal. But I just love that sets the tone right out of the gate. This idea that, if you come at it with that energy, that attitude, like, that's what the Superman, the most powerful, dynamic, the guy in the worst crisis, you can count on this dude to come through for you, or person, and I think it's born out of this energy of friendship. So another great example in superhero movies that I love of this idea of the way we win matters is the entirety of Black Panther: Wakanda Forever. Shuri goes on this incredible journey so by the way, there will be spoilers as I get into each item I'm talking about, each film or whatever. I'll let you know what we're talking about, and you can go watch it for yourself if you need to or whatever. But there will be spoilers. I'm not, because first of all, a lot of this stuff is, it's older stuff, so you can, you've probably already seen it already, or if I'm letting you know about it right now, you can stop and go watch it and then come back. So the journey that Shuri goes on is a really human journey. That's one of the things I love about that film, is that it's such a universal experience of this experience of loss of control, loss of connection, loss of direction and sense of security. And to watch this character start on the path that we see in the first Black Panther movie, we see the character Eric Killmonger. He, his path is one that from a very narrow perspective makes a lot of sense. And because of his narrow perspective and his narrow focus and ignoring other important factors and realities around him, he's able to do this one very powerful, specific sort of thing, because he has a very, sort of narrow view, a narrow path, and so on. So he's able to do this one thing, and it's all motivated by vengeance and hate, and there is a righteous, real, genuine reason he has to be angry and upset. But this is one of the first really great examples that I get to talk about, of where the way we win matters comes into play, because his way of winning, his way of confronting that challenge, he says it himself. He says at one point he's laid bodies all over the world, right? He kills all these people, even people from his own, who have his own same interests, basically, is what he's trying to say. He's killed people in Africa, where he came from, and he killed people all over the world so he could get this chance to take a shot at T'Challa and kill T'Challa. And so this is just his whole motivation is all centered around this one thing, and it's very angry, it's very wounded, it's very violent. By violent, I mean it's got an intention to violate other people. Excuse me. And what I think we'll come back to, the hallmark of a real villain, is even though he has a righteous and very understandable reason for being hurt and angry, he abandons his humanity in service of pursuing vengeance. And you see the cost of that along the way through his journey. You see how it costs other people. You see how it costs him. And eventually, it costs him his life. So we pick up in Wakanda Forever And Shuri now has gone through extreme loss again, right? So we see this, the world traumatizes us, and then, it lights this fire of anger and righteous fury inside of us, and to deny that is to destroy ourselves or to disregard our reality, and to indulge in it fully is to burn down everything that matters to us, the beloved, beautiful thing from whence we came. Killmonger burns down the heart-shaped herb and is choking out aunties in Wakanda, it's just like in the cultivation room or whatever, their garden, in the beautiful, placid, luminous garden, he chokes out this lady because his fury and his rage is just arcing out everywhere. This woman did nothing but serve this man. This woman did nothing to him. She's just a person just living her life, and his vengeance, he's just blinded by it. So he just on anything, whatever, And so you can see inherently this is a very unbalanced thing. Like, there's no way that good is going to come out of this, and it doesn't. And so now Shuri comes face to face with that same journey, because that's a walk that many of us have to walk, this journey of loss and grief and anger and rage and hopelessness and frustration and everything that comes along with that, right? So, Shuri, I think I love her character because she's so human. She gives in to these impulses the same way that Killmonger does, the same way that Tony Stark does in Civil War, right? Like, it happens. It's actually the same way that Captain America does in Civil War too, Steve Rogers. So you see, like, the humanity of it. Like, I understand why in history and in the real world today and, in real situations, why people, they incur these wounds. Some of them, it's a death by 1,000 cuts, a little bit over time, and then some big problem erupts from it. Or for some people, they just get hammered on from day one, and the world just, like, really wounds these people. And that has an echo effect, a ripple effect. And when Shuri experiences that, but then also has all this power at her disposal, you see the flailing, right? She's so powerful. She's so smart. She's so strong. She's got all this tech. She's got everything. And I love the way the story plays out because she's got this adversary, Namor, who is literally sort of like embodying the same energy that her cousin Killmonger had embodied before. And so here she gets caught up in that same energy, this energy of vengeance and hate. And so it's easy to slip into that, especially when times are tough, especially when something you really love or you've really invested in has been destroyed because somebody else in the world was having their own problem and it spilled into your life, right? So it's easy. It's easy to get caught up in it. And they show how easy it is. It's understandable. You're kind of rooting for her, And once you see his backstory, you're kind of rooting for him. Now we're rooting for everybody, but now they're fighting against each other. How do you root for two people who are fighting against each other? You can't. And you see the dysfunction play out and how if they don't come to their senses about it and change their attack pattern, change their goals, change whatever, that they literally are going to bring destruction upon everything they love. And they will be the ones responsible for it, both Namor and Shuri. And so I love that you really have to confront that. And really what it is, it's just, and I love that, like, that story ends with, and by the story I mean the conflict ends with her taking power back and deliberately in the moment where she has achieved victory, instead of hurting her opponent, she offers an olive branch. She offers her hand in peace. She says, hey, we're both going to be destroyed if we keep hurting each other like this. It doesn't matter who's right, who's wrong, how it started. Where we are now is at the edge of oblivion, and I do not want to cross that with you. And that is what they bonded over. And I just love that story in a moment like this. Another thing from the arts that I really love is the movie Ender's Game. And by the way, we'll probably go back at some point and do deeper dives on some of these or whatever. I've got a whole other YouTube series that once we got a little bit of cash coming in and I can afford to pay some people to help us with the production on it, there's a few other things I want to do that go deeper on these films and stuff like that. But one of the next ones that I really love is Ender's Game. The movie in particular is like what I have most experience with. And so, again, these are all spoilers, just heads up. But, Ender's big lesson, and by the way, some of these takeaways that I have been informed by a lot of YouTube channels that I really love. I can't name them all right now, but before too long, I just have to do like a big episode where I shout out all my favorite channels and stuff and tell you guys where I get the stuff from. But, I've learned a lot about some of the writing processes or the film interpretation and so on and so forth. Skills that you can sort of view these things through. And so looking back on Ender's Game, I really love sort of what makes him special. The character Ender is that what makes him notable, why they follow him for the story, is essentially that he's got a physically small stature and he's very intelligent, but mostly he's just a pretty good learner. And he's kind of good at a lot of different things, right? So he's kind of a jack of all trades, generalist kind of thing. And I love that at some point later in the story they even show this because he acknowledges this and calls in other experts who are better at other things than he is. I love that. But my point is that he's relatively unremarkable in most ways, but his spirit is part of what makes him so powerful and strong. And his approach is when he comes across a conflict, the tool that he goes for, his solution, is, excuse me, caught a mosquito on camera. Move, got it. Please don't be a parasite. Parasites suck. Okay. Anyway, got the windows open. It's been beautiful out today. Side effect, living in Florida, you get mosquitoes. But Ender, his whole deal, his sort of solution to conflict is, in this conflict, I will win the conflict and prevent all future conflicts from happening. Right? And that's something, there's a calm, cool, decisive kind of energy to that, right? And I totally identify with that, and I love it. And I like that they explored in that movie because you see it play out. Like, this is just how he approaches any challenge in his life, of no matter what form it is, whether he's being bullied by some kid and he's got to get the bully to stop bullying him, or he's got a puzzle to solve and we got to solve the puzzle, or there's team support and there's whatever. So the point is that he's like he is very analytical, but it is all in service of his commitment to this idea of resolving the conflict and preventing future conflict. And at the same time, he's still a young man, and I love that this story is about a very young man, because my younger self, I can definitely identify with this, where as the story plays out, again, if you have not seen this movie, please pause this, go treat yourself, watch Ender's Game. I can't speak to the books. I tend to err on the side of appreciating how the film was made and where that came from. But however you want to look at it, whatever the case, go check out the story, and then once you know, come back. But I'm all about movies, so my recommendation is a movie. Anyway, now that we got that out of the way, Ender basically has to go through a series of challenges that prepare him as a military strategist to be able to solve this big military problem. They're getting kids because kids think outside the box, and game culture and stuff, and there's some truth to this, the idea that gamification of things is a great way to build our skills, and as much as we often look down on people who do a lot of gaming, there's actually some really incredible neurobiology going on there, right? And it's kind of a big deal. So it's cool in its own right. But they get this kid, and he's sort of a what we would call like a savant or whatever. And please forgive I'm not like a clinician or anything like that. I'm just, I as an artist, mostly I work in like, I'll use what term we all reach for. We can qualify it. We can do whatever, but so somebody who's just extraordinarily talented at a thing, kind of gifted at, and so on. So this is how Ender is with the strategy of conflict, basically. It's kind of, that's what his strength is in. And so they have this really great kind of build up, and they have a big climax to this movie. And in the climax, Ender does what he does, but he thinks that it's a game, right? So the movie's Ender's Game. And so the whole rub is that he's playing the game. He's kicking butt. He's strategizing, doing what is required to win the game. And he does so in a fashion that is brilliant and frightening. And it's like, okay, well, so the movie does a great job because they set us up, and it's like, oh, yes, we all in on the brilliance. And then there's like this air of fright afterward. And it's like, where did that come from? And then you find out, oh, he had been lied to by the people who brought him into this whole mission. But that's the thing, is that they were partial lies. Those are some of the worst lies. The ones that they have a nugget of truth in them, but it's either distorted or misrepresented, or it's buried or hidden, or it's dropped in the wrong sequence, so it's out of context. There's a lot of ways the truth can be manipulated to become a lie. And so that's sort of what happens with Ender. And so as it turns out that, for one, he thought he was doing an exercise that was like a virtual sequence, that he was doing. Only to find out he was literally commanding the entire fleet of an actual real military attacking a real enemy, which he didn't know was real. He thought it was a drill. He thought it was fake, right? And so he did these things that were very effective to achieve the goal because it was a video game, right? And there are two horrific things that he does because he doesn't understand that it's real. He thinks it's a video game. And the first thing that he does that catches everyone's attention, which is why they were all kind of horrified and frightened when it's done, is that he just casually sacrifices like ships full of people, thousands of people, hundreds or thousands of people dying, and he does it, boom, sorry, I got the microphone over here. Anyway, so he just does it without a second thought, because if you're only thinking of strategy, then sure, yeah, and it technically does what you want it to do. And then he does all these other things, and we get to the point where now finally he's like, oh, really? The only way to win this thing is to sort of nuke the planet kind of thing. And so that's what they do, and it wins the game. And it wins all subsequent games because the enemy has been destroyed, right? Only to find out that, for one, again, this was all real. He didn't know. He was playing the game as he understood it. Something I like to call driving under the influence of culture. But the reality of his impact was far beyond what he understood it to be. And so what comes out is that he's like, well, had I understood that it was real, I would have done many different things. I would have done things way differently, right? And I would have tried other de-escalating solutions before just nuking the planet, or just, and so I love that story because it is an excellent exhibition of the feeling of why the way we win matters. Because if you do it in a way that's cold and calculated and doesn't account for the emotion or experience of other beings or other things outside of the picture, if you just focus on the mission or just following orders or whatever you're just doing, like, reality is more complicated than that, and you cannot deny it. You can ignore it at yours or everyone else's expense, but you cannot deny it. It is what it is, like gravity. You can't ignore that other people exist. and have it have no impact on the thing. And so he's devastated by this and changes his whole life and commits to fixing what he had done, which is something that I can identify with as somebody who sort of has come up in privilege and, a culture that's laden with colonization and genocide and all kinds of awful stuff, like coming from that. Like, I'm very eager to take the talents that I have and the gifts that I have and the ambition that I have and bring it out to go do some good with it. This is part of why I'm here right now, And again, I think that's something Superman would totally vibe with because, he came from Krypton. He wants to bring his gifts to the people of Earth as well, so I get it. Anyway, so I love that. If anything, probably my favorite thing about Ender's Game is just that if you go on the ride and you don't know until the end, it really does this great job of pulling the rug out from under you and showing you just how dramatically different perception, experience, and reality can all be from one another. We often think of them all as the same thing, perception, experience, and reality, but they're not. They actually all they're different. They just overlap a lot. So just like a partial truth, those can be like the trickier ones to sort of distinguish because you don't have the contrast or there's conflicting information and data. Okay, so I got a couple more examples in the arts section, and then I'm going to breeze through some of the academics and allyship components of this discussion. Again, I'm kind of new at this, so I want the discussion to be fluid. I want to be candid and authentic. But I also want to learn some stuff and explore some things. So for episodes like this one where it's just me, I'm just going to be exploring through the lenses of arts, academics, allyship, and we'll sort of do a takeaway. Sometimes this will be like an interview process, or I might have another guest on or something like that, or we might learn about something a little more, in a more academic capacity. But for some of these episodes, I think sometimes we just got to have we just got to chat about a thing for a bit, And so that's what I want today to be. It's a little more just kind of a chat. I made myself some notes, and we're going to go through and just do the chat. So that's what kind of episode I wanted this one to be. And there'll be more like it in the future, but there's so much to being a man and manhood and being human. Excuse me. That I think it warrants having different kinds of conversations from time to time. And so that's where we're at with that. All right, another couple of quick examples before I move on from the arts thing. I like to talk about Thanos. The big thing about Thanos is that he forces his will on literally the entire universe. And yet he, numerous times on screen, refuses to listen to other people, entertain other creative solutions, none of that, And then, of course, like I said earlier, you sometimes have people going back later after the movie comes out and be like, oh, Thanos, instead of snapping away spoilers, instead of snapping away half the universe, could have doubled the resources, or just had everything happen in everyone's head where all at once they understood, oh, we have to do this way, or things go to shit, it could have been a billion different things. But what I love about Thanos is that, oh, sure, from his one tiny narrow point of view, this totally made sense, and he was willing to do anything to make it happen, regardless. So he did not care about the way he won, right? The way he won did not matter. Only winning mattered. And we see why he's the villain, because he just tears through other people's worlds without a second thought. He doesn't have any care or understanding or anything for the for the lives that he impacts, and these are lives that are just as multidimensional, just as big, just to feel just as real as his life does, and he has total disregard. And so it's absurd. It's a very immature way to approach the universe, to think, oh, my point of view is the only one that matters. It's silly, right? Like, I've seen toddlers who act like that, and you're like, well, you expect that out of a toddler because they've got like zero life experience so far. But like when somebody gets older, they still act like that. It's a little silly. So, you know, I love that Thanos is just, I think part of what makes him such a great villain. For one, that lack of humanity. You see, he just all of the things that we think of as what humanity means. What does it mean to have humanity? To be empathetic, to be aware of other people's experience and know that you have an impact on their experience and understand that they have an impact on your experience. You get the interconnectedness of you and them and all of it. Like, we're all connected, right? And to disregard that is sort of to disregard humanity, whether you disregard your own connection to it or you disregard other people's humanity or whatever. Like, to disregard humanity is to be a villain, to be short-sighted and maybe an asshole. So that's Thanos, right? And he also, but so not only is he like a jerk, is that like, but it also, it's dumb, like it's stupid. He doesn't. It's a poor tactic. He likes to think of himself as a tactician, as a serious military man who's doing a serious mission. And yet he doesn't think constructively, creatively, cooperatively. There's all these other tools, literally a universe of tools at his disposal. Or he gets a hold of this magic wishing glove, and the only thing he can think to do is hurt people with it? Really? That sounds pathetic to me. Best case scenario, he's not the big powerful thing that he thinks he is, right? How pathetic. That's the best you could think to do? You have all phenomenal cosmic power. Itty bitty imagination. So, like, come on. And so I love that, sort of the opposite of that, right? Instead of the big, strong, brutish, bald dude, we can contrast him with Aang, who is himself a tiny, slimmy, little bald dude, right? But they have wildly different energy about them, wildly different intentions, and wildly different methodologies. And my favorite thing is that, as much as I even would get frustrated with it, in the TV series, the last Avatar: The Last Airbender, the main character Aang, again, please watch it first. This will all play a lot better if you've already seen it. But Aang, on his journey, he ends up having to confront the Fire Lord, who is sort of a very Thanos kind of character, but mixed with some other elements. But he shares the same thing with Thanos, that he's a very singular vision. He's very willing to do violence to make his vision happen, and he's not super concerned with other creative solutions or other voices. He doesn't care what anyone else thinks, He's a very selfish, self-centered, SDE kind of vibe that that Thanos and Firelord Ozai have going on. And so Aang, despite being confronted with this genocidal, violent, imperializing, terrorist, awful tyrant, instead of taking the easy path, which is, you're the Avatar, you got all the power in the world, you could literally just kill this dude and be done with it. And he could. Like, on paper, Aang wins. And it's to the death. Like, he could just kill that dude and it's over. Take his life from him. And I love that Aang goes to a lot of trouble. Goes out of his way. He struggles, like, logistically, intellectually. He struggles spiritually. And he struggles physically to not kill this person that he could easily kill. And instead preserve this person's humanity and just take his power to hurt other people away from him. And it was frustrating to me because when I first saw that story, I was more on like the Tony Stark side of things, where I was like, I'm not trying to hurt nobody, but if you're going to start some problems, let's rocket you in your face and be done with it. And so, that was one of the things that was so powerful to me about Aang, is that he he does the right thing, and at the end of it, you're kind of grateful that he did. You're like, oh yeah, he could have killed that guy, but it wouldn't have made anything better, and it would have just been a gross waste of life, of human life. It would have been an act of cruelty that didn't need to happen in the world. And so I think that with that mentality in mind, like, Aang is successful. He does win the day, and the way he wins matters, and he chooses to win in a way that is in service of a better world, is in service of a world that's healing, that's growing, that's fixing the past. That's what he creates in the moment where he decides to win the way he does. So this is why I love the arts, because it shows us, it gives us, we get to play out these scenarios and see what works and what doesn't. So we'd be like, oh, this thing happened in real life. I'm going to write it into a story, and we'll show why it sucked, and then we'll show, like, oh, this is how people have solved it, or how we could solve it, or how we will solve it, or how we are solving it, or whatever. And so, that's part of why, as an artist, I just have so much love for art, is that it gets to take us on that ride. And it can be such a great learning tool. It can make you feel better about yourself, about the world. It can open your mind to stuff you never understood or thought before. Just the power of the arts is incredible. So, with this idea, the way we win matters. What are some of the questions that I'll be asking myself when I'm sort of in a conflict or there's a challenge? So there's questions we can ask, like, how do we define a win? So for Aang, winning wasn't killing the Fire Lord. Winning was stopping him from hurting other people. Stopping him from being a tyrant. It wasn't get vengeance. It wasn't kill him. It was take away his power to hurt other people. That was the win. That was the goal. That was the objective. The target that he was trying to hit was that. And I love that sets the tone for the new world. I love that sets the tone for what happens after. I love that doesn't close the door on a human being who could evolve into someone who could be helpful in the world. Brilliant. Brilliant and powerful. He had all the power. And what did he do with his power? He did whatever he wanted. And what did he want to do? He wanted to show mercy so that he could begin building a better world. Wow. Right? So how you define your wins is important. If he had defined his win as killing the Fire Lord, there would have been success in the short term. Yeah, he would have technically stopped him from doing what he was doing. But what would have come from that? Oh, the Fire Lord is executed by the Avatar. Now there's a manhunt for the Avatar, and we're doing invasions into other countries for the Avatar. You know what I mean? Like, who knows, or whatever. But the point is that, like, it was a de-escalation. He de-escalated by taking the Fire Lord's power away, and he de-escalated by not killing him or hurting him beyond that point. Oh, you took his power away. Okay, we're done. The violence is done. And so, actually, that was actually the next thing on my notes is, how do we approach conflict with the intent to escalate or de-escalate? Do we seek retribution or resolution? And Aang chooses resolution. He chooses to de-escalate. He chooses love for the world. He chooses to set a better example than the Fire Lord is setting for the world. And to that point, the next thing that I had on my notes was that Aang grapples with this idea of, what are you prepared to do to achieve this win? What are you not prepared to do? And why? And I love it. They do such a great job on that show because they go through the legitimate reasons. There's legitimate reasons to just kill the dude. And there's legitimate reasons not to. And the reasons not to are holistic and long-term. And sometimes it can be challenging to weigh those against the short-term advantages of taking the cheap short route of just killing the dude. And so I love that Aang grapples with the realities of both of these things and comes to a conclusion because he weighs them both evenly. He understands that there is a reason to end this conflict as soon as possible. The more powerful the guy gets, the more damage he can do. So Okay, and if the way we're solving problems is to just wipe people off the map, that's a bad pattern to be building. That's not the way you set the tone for a new world. And so Aang grappled with both of these important realities. You have to stop what is, but you have to birth what isn't. And you can't birth what isn't by doing more of what is. And that's the thing is that, so then the next note that I had here is, what are our tactics and what is our impact? So the tactics have to be in service of your goal. What are you trying to do? In Aang's case, he was trying to take the power away from the Fire Lord to hurt other people. That was his goal. Not to hurt or kill the guy, just to take his power away, to get him to stop hurting other people. And so because that was his goal, his tactics were in service of that. Not to kill him, not to get the advantage, not to villainize him, just to stop him and stop the conflict and do repair. And what was his impact? Well, because he followed through on his values and he worked the problem and continued to keep his eye on the prize, which was his goal. His impact was that he was successful. He did the thing that no one thought he could do because he kept his eye on the prize, and the prize was find a peaceful resolution, take the guy's power away, and restore what has been lost as best you can. That was the deal, and he focused on that, not on vengeance, not on something else. And this is how you get through the tough spot to the real win. So, as we're out there in the world and we're trying to apply this in our day-to-day lives, what are some sort of like things we can be thinking about before we go out in the world? And then we'll have a few questions we can be asking ourselves when we sort of like, or things we can be, kind of checking out as we get in. So we're gonna do big concepts. We're gonna do what kind of mindset are we heading out in the world with, and then while we're out there, what kind of questions are we asking? So, broad strokes is, the truth is we're all connected to one another. Our actions impact the world around us, whether we recognize it or not. And it is both an advantage of our species and to us as people and individuals and as a civilization, but it can also be very dangerous to us, and that is this idea of driving under the influence of culture, right? Our culture is what gives us all kinds of things, our words, our music, our ideas, our numbers, and there's a lot of stuff, a lot of humaning stuff is made possible by the programs of culture. And yet, those programs can also sometimes be distorted, weaponized, or augmented such that they take over our other faculties and we become an idea and embody it without consciously realizing that we might be hurting someone else, or we might be ruining the thing that we love because we're doing something that is unconscious. We're just following our culture, following our attitudes, our beliefs, our church, our schools, our government, whatever, right? Instead, there's a real human thing that is more important, that is more powerful, that connects us all, that lives beneath all that. And if we get down to that deep, good stuff, then it's safe from all this other business, and we can sort of separate our perception, understand, this is culture, it can serve a purpose, but that's not all we are. I'm not an American, I'm not a man, I'm a human being. American is a role, man is a role, musician is a role, terrorist is a role, right? Firefighter, midwife, photographer, these are roles. But we are human beings, and we are what brings those roles to life. If we don't want terrorists in the world, we ought to start by making sure we're not terrorizing anybody. If we want love in the world, let's make sure we're out there putting love out into the world. So, this is what driving under the influence of culture can do to us. It can empower us, or it can betray our reality and make us do things that are counter to what we need and want. And that goes to the next note that I had, which is that perception is powerful and subjective. Meaning, perception can mean that you're experiencing reality in its visceral truth, or it can mean that you're totally detached from reality altogether. And you sometimes you can't always know the difference. It's like when you're in a dream and you don't realize you're dreaming, right? So perception and culture can be very distorting in this way, especially if it's being weaponized against us to get us all hyped up and angry. Because when we're hyped up and angry, we don't think super clearly. We don't do super well. So if someone can get you hyped up and angry, they can get you to make mistakes that you don't always recognize until maybe way later. And the final thing that, if we want to avoid repeating cycles of behavior without being aware of it, we're just accidentally just recreating the past, then, we have to be aware, for one, of our history and sort of how we got here. And we got to be just candid and compassionate about that. We don't need to judge it. Just be like, how did we get here? There's no right or wrong. It's just, oh, that's how we got here. And then as we're moving forward, we got to be very mindful of the difference between our intentions and our impact. We determine our intentions. The rest of the world tells us whether or not our impact matches that. Right? You don't get to decide what your impact is on other people. So if you punch me in the face, you don't get to tell me whether or not I hurt my face. Only I know whether or not I hurt my face. Right? And so you cannot speak to the impact of your actions. You can only speak to your intention. You have to ask the world, what was my impact? And they'll tell you and show you. So the takeaways: creating a better world will require us to build it with truth, love, and humanity. Nothing else will get the job done in the long run. We do this partially by looking out for win-win scenarios and then taking action and working toward those. We prevent problems by recognizing power dynamics and blind spots, and then we work to neutralize the impact of those things. Like, meaning, let's get rid of my blind spot by hearing other people's perspective, or let's offset a power dynamic by saying, oh, I'm in power right now, but I don't have to wield that power. I can share that power, right? Because a lot of times you don't need to be the one wielding the power. A lot of times we find ourselves, power has been given to us, but we didn't ask for it, we don't need it, and really somebody else could use it, and all we have to do is be conscious and give it to them, and then finally that power has a legitimate use, and we've done something good with it, and someone else is using it better than we could. So a lot of times, especially if you're somebody like me who finds himself in a position of privilege a lot, that's a great thing to do with power that you don't need or want, is you give it to somebody else who needs it, wants it, and if you're looking at power dynamics and you really understand those, and then you give power to people who don't have it, you see the beautiful things that come out of that. It's amazing. One of the things I look out for, if we're trying to build a better world, you got to look for the humanity in people and situations. Where is the humanity in a person's or an organization's thoughts? Do you hear humanity, warmth, kindness, compassion, empathy, love, anything that would be sustainable or healthy in the long run? Right? Do you hear that in the way they think and talk? Do you feel that in the energy when you interact with them? Or do they feel like they're trying to get something from you, or they're trying to take something from you, or they're trying to manipulate you or whatever, right? And in their actions, do their actions take from you, or are they extending with open hands? Are they consistent and reliable, or do they say one thing and do another? These are all the kinds of things we can look for. Where's the humanity? Do you consider other people's well-being, or do you not? And so we can keep an eye out, and that can tell us a lot. The way somebody treats other people can tell us a lot about their humanity. And where we have abandoned our humanity, trouble always follows. So I guess probably the big takeaway with the way we win matters is that we're more powerful than we realize. So remember, like they said in the Spider-Man comic, with great power comes great responsibility. You are literally the only one responsible. If you're the one powerful enough to do something, pouvoir means, it's a French word, to be able. Pouvoir, power. They sound similar because one is derived from the other. And so power simply is the ability to do something. And so whatever you are able to do, that you do in the world, you are responsible for. who else would be responsible? You're the one who is, so like, I'm responsible for every step I take, for every word I say. And there are complexities in that. People can be coerced or pressured into things, and there are that's why we look for those power dynamics. And we'll go do a deeper episode on that later. But there it is. It's like, when we just understand that whatever we are able to do, we are responsible for, and whatever anyone else is able to do, they're responsible for, then it makes it easy. You don't assign blame to somebody who didn't have the power over a thing, right? So if somebody crashes a car, you don't blame somebody who's in the back seat. You know what I mean? Because they're not driving. They're not the one in control. So you don't blame them. You blame whoever is in control. And when it comes to blame, that's another thing we got to start looking into is our cultural programming and what that means. But we'll dig into that another time. So, the action items. What do I do, when I'm actively trying to work a problem? When I say the way we win matters, what are some of the things that I'll be asking myself when I'm in the middle of a challenge? So I ask myself, like, what kind of world is being created by these actions? Sometimes if I am having a challenging moment with my son or somebody out in the world or something like that, I may feel frustrated or upset or stressed out by something they're doing or saying or whatever. But I understand that, like, I'm trying to create a certain kind of world. And so I understand that my actions have impact over the situation. My actions have impact over how they feel about themselves, about how they feel about me, about how they feel about the world. I understand that my actions can have unintended consequences. So I'd be mindful to, like, not overreact because that can have big unintended consequences. So I try to be measured in my responses. And so these are all the things that I think about when I think what kind of world is being created by these actions. Just being aware of my power, basically, and understanding that I can change somebody's world. If it's a little baby, I can change their world just by looking at them. I may be the first person who ever looked them in the eye. You know what I mean? So, like, to change someone's world might be I mean, it could be the smallest thing to change somebody's world for a day, and it could change the trajectory of their whole life. So those little acts matter just as much as the big ones. So I'd be mindful of what I'm trying to create in the world as I'm trying to solve problems and meet my challenges. What's the desired outcome? I try to keep the desired outcome in mind. And I don't, like we said earlier, like, how we define our wins is an important part of the equation. So my desired outcome is what I consider to be a win. And so then we're asking, how does that affect the rest of the community and the world? Sometimes winning the battle means losing the war. But if the war is to have a healthy, better, happier community, sometimes there's battles you don't need to win. You don't even need to fight them. As a matter of fact, the only way to lose is to fight about it. Some things, it turns out it's a non-issue. It feels important in the moment, but when you look back on it, it was never important. And you could have easily just let it go. Some stuff isn't like that. Some stuff is very important that you get in the game and you take action. But that's the point, is that learning to discern what is worth getting upset over, what is worth investing in. This is part of, like, how we understand ourselves and how we get clarity. We stop trying to put simple solutions onto complex problems and stuff like that, is by starting to appreciate these little nuances about our experience. And again, I always come back to, what are the power dynamics at play? There will never be a time when that's not a factor. So power dynamics are a very important part of what's right and wrong. It's a very important part of whether or not things function properly. It's true in physics. It's also true in relationships. So power dynamics is important. And finally, is there accountability, especially where there is power? If there's not accountability where there's power, something is wrong. And the way that we win, if that's the way we win, with power but no accountability, bad things would come from it. So part of the way that we win that actually sticks, that actually makes a better world, is power has to come along with responsibility and accountability. And so we'll talk a little bit more about what we mean by accountability, in some other episodes. But I think we did it. I think we got to the end, y'all. So it looks like we're just over an hour in. This is episode 2. So once again, my name is Miles. This is Miles and the Supermen, a podcast series for men and boys. It's currently available on YouTube. And so for me, I make music, film, and other content. You can check all that stuff out on my Linktree. If you want to support my work, you can grab some merch from my online store, or consider joining my Lovecore community on Patreon. The Lovecore platform is sort of a space for community action and transformation, where you can discover and unlock the superpowers within, and then bring that to your community so that we can make the world better together. So all kinds of cool stuff on there. We've got arts, academics, allyship resources, and information and projects and stuff. So that's all under Lovecore. We're the heroes we've been waiting for. That's our platform. And so you can also find all this stuff at www.thelovecore.net. And so thank you so much for hanging out with us. And we'll see you on the next one.